guys, welcome back to our channel, Marriage and Medicine. This week TJ's gonna be happy because we're talking about money. No, you like talking about money.
I hate this topic.
Literally anything with money. Saving money, budgeting, investing, anything with money. So this week we are talking about money, more specifically paying back loans. So make sure you are subscribed to our channel if you want to see more videos from us. And if you want to follow us over on Instagram, you can do that at Marriage in Medicine.
Yeah, so loans. Nobody likes them. I mean, you took the money out, you got your education, your money's due. You're going to have to pay it back. That's just kind of how it goes. So essentially, first things first, try to minimize as much loans as possible. But going through med school, it's pretty much nearly impossible to come out of there without any loans, unless you have very generous family members who are willing to pay for that, which the majority of individuals don't necessarily have. So if you're like the majority of individuals going to medical school, you're going to come out with a pretty significant amount of debt. I believe like average around at this time is around 200,000, give or take. So just be prepared for that if you decide to go through medical school. So when you're taking out loans during medical school, you're pretty much not going to have to worry about trying to pay them back, again, because you don't make any money. But once you get to around fourth year of medical school, you're going to have that exit interview where they're going to put some different loan options in front of you, and you're going to have to pick one to kind of get started. Most of your loans that you are going to take during medical school are backed by the government, essentially. They're government loans. And so you get placed into this repayment program where it's based off of your income. So a lot of times it's basically called income-driven repayment. There's two different ones that people majority go into, and that's called repay and pay. Again, not going to go into too many details. You'll be able to you need to just basically look that kind of stuff up. There's many resources out there to try to get information, but those are the two main ones. The most common one is repay, mainly because during your actual repayment, they will essentially pay a portion of your interest off. The government will. And so a lot of people end up choosing that option because that one ends up saving you the most money a lot of times, depending on your financial situation and your marital situation, all those kind of things. But those are the main ones. So you don't have to necessarily start making payments until October, I believe it is, of your intern year of residency.
Usually 6 months.
6 months,
after
There you go, 6 months after. Exactly. But also keep in mind that this is kind of a way to kind of get around not having to pay money that first year altogether. If you did not make any money during medical school, then essentially when you get out, they're going to ask you what was your income that you filed on your most recent tax return. Make sure you are filing tax returns during medical school also. This will kind of help in that situation. And you essentially will say zero because you didn't make any money. And so because of that first year out, you won't necessarily have to pay any money back. But if your plan is to pay money back and to start making some payments, then definitely go ahead and sign up to start making payments at that time.
Well, I was just going to say, when you signed up for your loans, there were some things that they take into account when you have to pay them back. So they take into account, well, number one, they look at your taxes from the previous year. But number two, they will look at if you are married or not. They will look at if you have kids. If you do have kids, how many kids do you have? If you don't have kids, whatever. They will also look at if your spouse, if you're married, did your spouse work or did they not work? So there's like all these different factors that play into them deciding how much you're going to pay back. So they don't just, kind of just pick a number. They do kind of weigh out like, okay, this person's married, they have 3 kids, like let's take that into consideration. So for us, we at the time, they based it off of us just being married. We didn't have any kids. I was working on a teacher salary. He wasn't working. So our loan payments initially were very low.
Not much, yeah.
And then once we had Naya, I'm sure they increased. I can't remember what they were.
It was literally went from 140 to 155.
Yeah, it wasn't bad at all.
That much at all.
But next year, best believe. Well, maybe not even next year because it'll be based off of residency taxes. So
it'll still be.
I don't know, but best believe it's coming where those payments are about to increase dramatically. So at least you don't have to wait, or at least you don't have to deal with that initially when you go into residency. More than likely, you won't deal with that until after you've graduated residency.
So when it comes time to get to the point where you're having to pay back these loans, there's kind of two different categories of where people fall when it comes to this. Some people's philosophy is pay it back as soon as possible just to have it out the way. And there's another group that will essentially try to just kind of let it ride and pay the minimums until they hope that it gets paid off. And in the meantime, they're putting money into the market and different things of that nature, trying to make more money essentially out of that. But really, it's more so about what your actual financial philosophy is. If you are in that camp of paying it off faster, then make sure that that is your goal and make sure that that is where your money is going towards. Because if you're making only the minimums, keep in mind that interest is going to continue to accumulate. So you're going to
quickly.
Yeah, you're going to start making all these minimum payments and you're like, oh yeah, I'm paying off loans. And then you look at it 10 years down the road and you're like, I actually have more money that I owe now, despite me still paying all of these payments. That's because of interest. It's going to eat up your money. So another thing that you also want to keep in mind is at this time, there still is that ability to do the public service loan forgiveness. That's something that you definitely want to look into. If you have just a significant amount of loans, just kind of talk with your financial advisor or your financial advisor at school, somebody that knows much more about it in terms of seeing if that is a good idea for you to pursue. Essentially what that is you work for either a government company or like a public, like a non-for-profit organization. You work for 10 years essentially, and you get your loans forgiven. Is essentially how that goes in a nutshell. But definitely, if that's something that you're interested in, definitely make sure you look into that as well.
Basically, like he was saying, you have to just kind of decide what your goal is or what your plan is. Everybody's going to have a different plan. Some people really want to get them taken care of faster, and some people just don't really care. So you kind of just have to look at your life and what your ultimate goals are and just decide from there. So for us, we would rather get them paid off sooner than later. Yeah. Of course, we've made the initial payments when he first started residency. But right now there's also a deferment period that's going on because of the pandemic. So technically loans aren't required. You can still pay them if you desire to, but there's no penalty if you don't pay them. And that got pushed back till the end of January of next year. So they don't start till February 2022.
Yeah.
So right now our choice was just not to pay loans. Mainly because of some other financial things that we need to take care of, such as right. TJ's car, right. Getting him a car. And we're also wanting to buy a house next summer. So we're trying to focus on those things right now. And then by the time loan payments come back, we'll be focusing on two of those things at the same time. But yeah. Like I said, really, you just have to decide what your goal is. If you're wanting to pay loans back, say within 5 years, then what you would need to do is look at your loan amount and break it up. You kind of have to work backwards. So you would look at your total, you would decide whatever your goal is, 5, 10, 15, however many years, and then you would go backwards. There's 12 months in 1 year. If I do, break it down, I guess, even further than that. If you had $100,000 of debt, and you break it up by 5, that is $20,000, correct? I'm not. Quick math. And if you break that down by 12, sounds about right. That would be, I couldn't even tell you off the top of my head, say $2,000. It's less than that, but $2,000 a month. So if you paid $2,000 a month for 5 years, you would hit $100,000, probably would pass it a little bit. That's essentially what you would have to do with your loans. Decide what your goal is and work backwards to see how much do you need to pay a month to hit your goal. For us, our goal is within, I would say 2 to 3 years. 3 years, yeah. So we're kind of looking at, okay, this is our amount, working backwards. How much do we have to pay every month for 3 years to get that loan knocked out?
Yeah, and there's all kind of financial calculators for loan repayment that you can look at. And because with those, you can also add in the interest also. So it'll be much more precise, essentially, in terms of how much you're actually going to need to pay it off. So I would definitely look into using those as well. And another thing is, a lot of times when you come out of medical school, your interest rate is going to be pretty high, mainly because where it is currently with the Stafford loans. They're pretty high. They're around 6%, give or take. And if your goal is to basically pay it down faster, then you would likely want to refinance to get a lower interest rate as well. So that basically would decrease the amount you have to pay in total. So that's something else that you should talk to your advisor about, or talk to whoever you need to about, to kind of get that information.
One more thing you might want to consider when it comes to trying to decide how soon you want to pay off your loans is think about other big financial purchases that you might make within that time frame. So if you are wanting to buy your first house at some point, or wanting to buy a new car, that's something that you would need to factor in with making your goal. Like for us, we want to buy our first house, so that was something we considered when trying to decide a goal as far as like how soon we would be able to pay off loans, and how soon would we be able to buy a house. Now, if you're somebody that when you graduate residency, you don't really have any plans of changing anything financially, as far as like you don't plan on moving or buying a new house, you don't plan on buying any new cars, any of that stuff, and your bills essentially are going to stay the same for a few years, then it might be a little easier for you to figure out what your time frame is. But just keep that in mind in case you do want to do those things, because that can delay paying off student loans as well.
All right, so thank you guys for watching. If you have any other questions about loans, feel free. You can leave a comment. You could message us on Marriage and Medicine, basically on our Instagram page if you follow us on there. But another good resource is the White Coat Investor. He has so many different blogs, so many different articles on there that you can look at and get a lot more information about, and it is tailored specifically towards medicine. So if you have a need to want to look more into that, that was definitely a good resource. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. See you later.